Hey, it's Dr. Amanda with Straightsmile Solutions, straightsmilesolutions.com, and I have over 100 videos to date just on retainers. I can't believe it. In my retention playlist on my YouTube channel, which has over 4,000 videos, over 100 just on retainers. Who knew? Um, I don't add very many videos very often because I mean, how much updates are there on retainers? I mean, retainers are retainers, right? So, whether you're thinking about using bonded retainers, permanent retainers, Hollies, different types of Essex, Viveras, Thoreaus, lingual arches retention. Obviously, I've got a whole pile of content just for phase one retention, which isn't, you don't always need a retainer for phase one. I'm not even talking about this. I'm talking about phase two comprehensive. You know, don't always need one. And sometimes it's worse if you deliver one. So let's talk about pros and cons and what's out there and kind of what the literature says and what's standard of care. And I don't know that there's that much literature on this. I had a hard time pulling it. I think this is more of a standard of care thing. And if you don't understand what standard of care is, this is really going to depend on your own country. And it even comes down to your own state if you're in the United States. So look into the standard of care, the Dental Practice Act in your state, what the laws are. They're constantly changing. I can't possibly know all 50 states' standard of care, and let alone other countries' standard of care. So, and it's not always published, right? You should go into the YouTube video I've already made on standard of care in orthodontics. Actually, I've made tons. There's an entire playlist just about lawsuits and standard of care. So, anyways, go into that, check it out. You should understand your standard of care for where you're located, and you need to practice up to your standard of care. Just because you don't own a certain type of material or equipment or supply doesn't mean that it's okay to not do something if it's standard of care. So, there are definitely times where, well, I'll just list a couple random times I'm thinking. So, I mean, usually you're going to do your retainer because if you're doing orthodontic treatment, everything always moves back, right? So, main thing, you got to make sure that everyone knows this. I mean, there's nothing worse than you spent a year and a half or so on some case and then all of a sudden you're like, well, here's your retainer. Guess what? You're going to wear this for life. And they're like, what? You didn't tell me that. First of all, that should be in like every single piece of paperwork. It should be all over your walls. It should be part of your message. It should be everywhere. It should be on your website. It should be in your blogs. Nobody should be surprised that they have to wear a retainer if they want to ensure their good outcome. Some people don't have to wear them as much. Some people have to wear them more. I can't predict. Actually, I can predict. That is definitely something I can predict. Obviously, the later you start, the more you're going to have to wear your retainer. If you do more phase one and get most of the correction by fixing jaws, bone does not relapse. If we grew a lower jaw, if we grew an upper jaw, if we actually expanded a palate in the two shelves and held the expansion, and assuming it was worn full time or it was fixed, and held it for the minimum 3 months and let it settle, those are completely stable because bone grew in. What we're talking about is we're talking about the relapse of teeth. Remember, teeth are held to the bone through tiny little series of rubber bands called the periodontal ligament or the PDL. They're little bouncy bungee cords that provide shock stabilization and proprioception, and they also have nerves and vasculature. And they innervate and keep the teeth, which are vital structures, alive. So they're little bitty things that just kind of sit in our mouth, and we've got 28 to 32 or 24 of them bouncing all around and doing stuff all day long. So they're important. So sometimes, let's just say we did a case really, really young where a lot of the orthodontic correction was bone movements. Well, no, that's not going to relapse, right? But if we had a rotated, canine that we derotated, created space, and spun, well, yeah, those little bungee cords have memory and they're going to want to go back to their original memory. So, yeah, then you're going to have to wear a retainer for that. Obviously, doing things younger, I definitely think there's less need for retention the younger you do a certain movement. I don't know how much literature is out there on that, but that's a fact, Jack. So I don't know if it's just the bones or the maturity of the PDLs or whatever, but that's just what it is. I'm not saying you don't have to wear it. I'm just saying you're going to get away with wearing it less. As for how much you actually need to wear it, really depends on the density of your bone. Can't predict. No one can give you that answer. I have some great content on when to phase down a retainer. You're never going to completely stop wearing it. You're always going to wear it a little bit. But that sweet spot you're going to have to find, and no orthodontist can give you that sweet spot. So listen to all the retainer videos I have on phasing down your retention, and you'll get the scripting down. And the tricky part is getting that scripting and putting it in a policy. So, and making sure that your patients are coming back and understanding it. So you just gotta, everyone in your office should know this message. They should know the verbiage backwards and forwards, and they should be able to recite it. So let's go over some cases where maybe it's not good to wear a retainer. Well, if we didn't finish for whatever reason, sometimes we can't finish. Maybe there's a health problem, an allergy, a tooth is just misbehaving and just getting root resorption, and doesn't mean you did something wrong. Just, we got to end this. We're 80, we're there, we're 85% there, we're 90% there. It looks really good. I think it's time to stop. Sometimes we just can't do a retainer because the risks of the retainer outweigh the benefits of the retainer. The benefits are keeping things straight and looking nice. Sometimes, can't. Due to trauma or whatever else. Hygiene. If they can't keep their teeth clean, they're not getting either something bonded or something that's going to trap bacteria over the top of them. They're not getting this or this. Absolutely not. If they have any plaque, they're not getting either of those. They're going to get this. This is the one that you can wear with bad hygiene. These you don't wear with bad hygiene. So it's that simple. If they have bad hygiene, then they get one set of hollies, not 4 sets. One set of hollies. And those hollies will last them the rest of their life. They do not need another set of hollies. They're not going to outgrow them. I still have my holly from 1990s. I still wear it probably one night a week. It's generally pretty tight when I put it on. If it aches when I put it on, I left it out too long, and usually there's a teeny bit of relapse, but it always comes back, right? So that's kind of how I roll in terms of hygiene. Same thing with perio. I mean, perio, unless it's a perio splint you can bill, or the periodontist can do it. You can bill separately and get some production. I don't want to get into that, but I mean, I have a lot of content on perio splints, but what you need to do in order to bill a perio splint. But you got to talk to perio. But obviously you got to have a perio diagnosis, and you got to have a reason for a perio split. But yeah, I mean, in that case, that's fine. We talked about our hygiene deficiencies, accumulating pathogens either back here or under here. That's a definite no. Breeding grounds. I mean, there's so many kids with bombed out teeth who have Essex or Viveras that just aren't, or they think they're being good because they're wearing their retainer, but they're actually damaging their teeth. So in that case, no, you don't get a retainer. I'm sorry. If teeth relapse, so be it. You can't show me that you can be healthy enough to keep your teeth straight. So, maybe in a few months you can get one, but things may have shifted. But obviously you're going to have to document this kind of mess. This should really not be happening at the end of treatment, because if they had bad hygiene or periodontal disease, you probably shouldn't have even started the treatment. So that's what I'm saying, to kind of take away the retainer. I mean, unless it's a problem that started towards the end and then we had to discontinue them, then that would be more of an issue. But you better make sure your documentation is impeccable if you're going to pull something like this. And flip side goes, if you give them this or this because they wear you down and they have hygiene issues and they fail, if you give them this and they fail the retainer check, you better start sending a discontinuance form, because you are married to this patient with one of these bonded retainers, and you need to figure out how that you're going to be checking it for life. And if there is a cost, you need to let them know. I mean, usually we no charge the cost if they're coming in for hygiene visits for, like prophies and stuff. Like, this is a GP pediatric office. No charge a check. We're not saying we're no charging a repair, but we're no charging a check. But if they stop going to your office, then they need to find someone else to check the retainer. That's not going to be included. So you need to come up with your policy. And my suggestion is you have that policy in writing at the time of delivery, because otherwise it can blow up in your face, especially when you go to sell that office later. What else? Sometimes there's some situations where a tooth is just too broken down to do a retainer, or we just have really, really strange morphology where certain type of retainers aren't going to work. So sometimes we don't do it. Sometimes we maybe have, it's just such a minor thing. Let's say an example where there's a tooth that was in anterior crossbite. I'm just gonna give you an example, like number 8. Well, if I jumped it, it's not going to go back to anterior crossbite. It's impossible because I jumped it. So, I mean, could it get a little crooked? Maybe, but it's probably not going to go back. So you got to think about where it started. You also have to keep in mind all the other extrinsic habits and get into really the whole myo and airway thing, because you may have managed to finish the case, but if there's myo, ENT, airway stuff going on, or extrinsic forces, yeah, it's going to relapse more than an average case, and a retainer might not be enough. Maybe you need double retention or something like that, or maybe they need to be doing ENT treatment or myo treatment at the same time. Again, if you didn't mention that at the beginning and then you're just relying on the retainer to hold something when you did some heroic stuff and you're lucky you got there, well, it's going to be on you if things relapse because you didn't mention it. If you mentioned it and you gave them a referral and you reminded them that there might be more relapse than the average, and that relapse in the face of airway or myofunctional issues are not something that's going to be retreated at no cost. It will be retreated after a release at an additional fee. That's a different story. So make sure you mark all that down. So yeah, that's basically my suggestions, as well as allergies. I mean, there's some people that just aren't comfortable with retainers. Like maybe they don't want plastic retainers. A lot of people with metal braces aren't comfortable with having an Essex retainer. So I mean, have that conversation ahead of time. A lot of people don't love the idea of having plastic in their mouth, at nighttime. So this is definitely something that you want to be talking about throughout the treatment. And you don't have to promise what type you're going to recommend. Just say that one set of retainers, if that is recommended, will be covered. And if they need additional sets, depending on what type we choose, there will be additional fees. And I don't think you should force everyone to have an Essex. I think they should be given a choice of an Essex or a Holly. This lasts for life. This is going to need multiple replacements. I think everyone should get a choice of an Essex or a Holly, unless it's better for them to have. If the Essex or the Vivera is the only option, then I think they need to have 4 sets of it. And I think you should comp the 4 sets, in my opinion. Or unless you put it in the contract at the beginning that they will get 1 set, they can upgrade to the 4 sets. They're going to need minimum 4 sets for life, if not more. So the problem is, if that's the best option and you're not offering them this option for whatever reason, and there's some situations where I wouldn't offer this. If there was a vertical or extrusion issue, then I wouldn't. Then I think this would be better. So, and sometimes we do this and this. So it's whatever is best, whatever is recommended. If they want something that's different or more of something, then they're going to pay for the difference. So this is a conversation you need to be having throughout the year and a half treatment. It should be constantly coming up. If it's a kid, you need to have their feedback, because they're going to have feedback because their friends are in retainers. They're going to know what they want. Back in the 80s and 90s, everyone had a Holly. That's what everyone had, or a bonded retainer. Those were the only options. They didn't have these. So this was normal. Now there's this, and this for retainers, as well as positioners. So they may be thinking they're going to get a certain type of retainer, and then when you don't give them what they're expecting, they may get upset and they may not be compliant. So and the parents may be thinking that they're getting this and they're getting this, and the parents may not be happy about that, especially if they're going to need to buy more sets for a lifetime. The parents may say they have to have this, but they may not wear this at school. So that's why, you need to be the conversation person, making sure that, hey, if we're choosing this, is this going to be worn at school? Because if it's not, I would rather have this and maybe one of these to wear at school. I don't know. There's lots of things. There's benefits to this because this helps the bite settle. I wouldn't do this and this unless I did this for 2 months first full time and then I did this. But that's just my thought. All right. Anyways, too much about retainers. You guys get the idea. Definitely when you start working on cases, work with an orthodontist, because this is a really easy way to get a complaint, get a lawsuit. I'm not trying to scare you guys off of doing ortho, but retainers are like the number one way you get a complaint. It's such an easy thing to manage, but yet people don't think they're important, but they're actually extraordinarily important. So yeah, sometimes it's not standard of care to deliver a retainer, but you better have really, really good charting if you're not going to do that. All right, thanks.